My name is David Miller, and in the fall of 2018, my family and I moved into the house I inherited from my grandmother. The property was located on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, a region surrounded by dense forests and mountains. The Victorian house, built in the early 20th century, seemed to be the perfect home to start a new life. My wife Laura, our children Cole and Abigail, and I were excited about the move. In the first week, we noticed that something was strange. The lights flickered for no reason, and we heard unexplained noises during the night. Initially, we attributed this to electrical problems and the aging of the house. However, the incidents began to intensify. One night, while we were having dinner, we heard a loud noise coming from the hallway. Cole, curious as ever, went to investigate. He came back pale, saying that all the pictures in the hallway had fallen simultaneously. I went to check, and indeed all the pictures were on the floor. We put the pictures back on the walls, but fear had already taken hold of us. The following week, Abigail woke up in the middle of the night screaming. She said she felt someone pulling her blanket and heard whispers near her bed. Laura and I tried to comfort her, but we couldn't explain what was happening. Every day, strange things only increased. One of the objects that intrigued me the most in the house was an old family portrait hanging in the living room. It was a black and white portrait with a stern expression and a penetrating gaze. My grandmother never talked much about that portrait, just mentioned that it was a portrait of a distant ancestor. Over time, I noticed a pattern in the strange events. It seemed that every time something bizarre happened, the portrait was somehow involved. Lights flickered more intensely, objects moved frequently, and whispers grew louder when we were near it. Determined to understand what was happening, I began to investigate the history of the house and the portrait. I found out that my family had lived there for several generations, and each of them had real paranormal stories as disturbing as the ones we were experiencing. Many believed that the house was haunted, but no one knew for sure why. I talked to some old residents of Asheville and found out that the man in the portrait was known for strange practices and reclusion. Some local legends mentioned obscure rituals, but there was no concrete evidence. One night, things reached a breaking point. We were all in the living room when suddenly the lights started flickering violently, and we heard a deafening sound of breaking glass. The portrait fell from the wall with incredible force, almost as if it had been thrown. At the same moment, we felt a cold and heavy presence in the room. It was as if something invisible was walking around. A feeling of pure terror took hold of us. We decided we could no longer stay there. We grabbed some essential things and left the house that same night, leaving everything behind. And these are things that will never let you sleep well at night. Since we left the house, we never returned. We tried to sell the property, but all attempts failed. The house remains there, empty and isolated, a monument to the unknown and the unexplainable. My family and I still try to move on with our lives, but the memories of those days in the house in Asheville haunt us to this day, and disturbing and true stories of paranormal activities. We will never forget the terror I experienced with my family. People may be skeptical about reports of paranormal activities, but I know what we experienced. That place was beyond our understanding, and the experiences we had there are something we will never forget. Our only choice was to flee and never look back. Sometimes at night, I still wonder what really happened in that house. What was in the portrait that triggered such events? Were the ancient rumors about my grandfather true? These questions remain unanswered, and perhaps it's better that way. Some things are better left in the past, since we don't know how to deal with the occult and things like supernatural activities. When we moved to a quiet town, Julia, was excited about the new house. It was an old but beautiful house with large windows and a charming garden. My parents, Carlos and Anna, and my brother Lucas were equally excited about this new phase in our lives. However, in the first few days, I felt something strange. On the first night, while trying to sleep, I heard whispers in a language I didn't understand. I thought it was just my imagination, but the next night the whispers returned, clearer and closer. As the days passed, the whispers became more disturbing. I could feel an inexplicable coldness in my room, even when it was warm outside. One day, while I was alone in my room, I felt a tug on my hair. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. I told my parents about what was happening, but they thought it was just me adjusting to the new house. Lucas joked that I was making everything up for attention, but I knew something was wrong. Weeks passed, and the events became more intense. I began to wake up in the middle of the night with my sheet being pulled off the bed. There were times when I felt pushes as I walked around the house during the day. My parents started to worry, especially when they saw scratch marks on my body that I couldn't explain. One night I felt a strong pressure on my feet, as if someone was trying to pull me out of bed. I woke up screaming, and my parents rushed to my room. They saw the marks on my ankles and finally believed that something very strange was happening. Desperate for answers, my parents began to investigate the history of the house. They found out that the house was built on a site where witches were hanged during the Inquisition. This explained the supernatural events I was experiencing, but we didn't know what to do about it. One day, while my parents were discussing whether we should move or not, we received an unexpected visit. It was Mr. Almeida, an old neighbor who had lived on the same street for decades. He seemed to know more than he was initially willing to admit. Mr. Almeida told us stories that had been passed down from generation to generation in the town. He explained that many families who had lived in that house had experienced similar events. The spirits of the unjustly executed women seemed to have never found peace. This house carries real disturbing paranormal stories, he said. The witches hanged here did not find rest, and their disturbed souls continue to haunt this place. It is not safe for you to stay here. My advice is to leave this house behind. Find a new home and let the past rest. After Mr. Almeida's visit, my parents finally decided it was time to leave. We packed our things and moved quickly, leaving the house and its horrors behind. Despite everything, the experience marked us deeply. I will never forget what I experienced in that house, and even today, when I think about those days, I feel immense fear. Sometimes I think I will never sleep peacefully at night again. The house still stands there, empty and silent, with its dark secrets buried beneath its foundations. And so we move on, carrying with us the reminder that some stories from the past never really die. In the quiet town of San Miguel, Mexico, young Diego, just 10 years old, stumbled upon a mysterious object while playing on the dirt road. Amongst stones and dried leaves, something gleamed in the sun, catching his attention. It was an ancient amulet, adorned with strange and intricate symbols carved into its golden surface. Fascinated by the discovery and the promise of adventure, Diego tucked the amulet into his pocket and ran home, eager to share the news. Little did he know he was about to unleash unimaginable terror. In the days that followed, disturbing and inexplicable events began to invade Diego's life. At night, when the house fell silent, he started hearing sinister whispers emanating from the amulet, tucked away in his drawer. They were murmurs in an unknown language, dark and menacing. Diego tried to ignore them, convincing himself they were just products of his fertile imagination. However, the shadows around the house began to move in unsettling ways, as if they had a life of their own. Diego started seeing grotesque and distorted creatures in the shadows. They were tall figures with bright red eyes, sharp claws, and pale, translucent skin. These entities watched him with hungry and malevolent stares. Sometimes they seemed to want to pull him into the darkness, extending long, skeletal arms towards him, whispering promises of eternal suffering. Diego's health began to dip. He lost his appetite and was plagued by terrible nightmares every night. His parents, Carmen and Javier, grew deeply concerned as they watched their son waste away before their eyes. Diego's joy and energy were replaced by a haunting pallor and deep dark circles. He would often wake up screaming, drenched in cold sweat, saying the creatures were trying to drag him to some dark and unknown place. Carmen and Javier tried everything to calm Diego down. His mother brewed relaxing teas and sang old lullabies, while his father constantly checked the rooms to ensure everything was safe. However, nothing seemed to work. Despair gripped the family, who didn't know who else to turn to. Desperate, Carmen and Javier decided to seek spiritual help. They sought out Father Miguel, a wise and respected man in the community, known for dealing with inexplicable phenomena. Upon examining the amulet, the priest immediately sensed a dark aura emanating from the object and understood the gravity of the situation. He warned the family about the presence of an evil entity linked to the amulet and offered his help to rid them of this evil. Tension mounted as they prepared to confront forces beyond human understanding. Guided by Father Miguel, the family embarked on a spiritual journey to purify the house and destroy the cursed amulet. They performed ancient and powerful rituals involving sacred herbs, holy water, and fervent prayers. During the ritual, the priest recited ancient prayers in Latin, his voice echoing through the walls of the house. As the ritual progressed, the shadow creatures became more aggressive, attempting to attack Diego and his family. The entities lunged at them, trying to prevent the destruction of the amulet. Father Miguel, clutching his crucifix, recited even more fervent prayers, repelling the attacks of the creatures. A sense of peace began to fill the air as the shadows slowly dissipated. The amulet, now engulfed in purifying flames, disintegrated, taking with it the evil entity and its creatures. With the amulet destroyed and the entity banished, Diego began to slowly recover. His nightmares lessened and his health gradually improved. Though still shaken by the trauma, The family found comfort in their unity and in overcoming this terrifying challenge. Let this be a warning to be careful with your children bringing things from the street without knowing where they came from. I hope this account can help other mothers. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, you won't want to miss this next one. Click now and I'll see you there.